If it's that important to you to put a train tracks in your basement and run that thing like Mr. Rogers had, probably not adding a whole lot of value to the house. Be cool, don't get me wrong, but make sure you're adding value if that's indeed your goal.
Welcome into the Get Invested podcast, a podcast about all things real estate and real estate investing, brought to you by Capital Velocity Investments and a part of the Matthias Talks Investing Substack.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Get Invested podcast with your hosts, Jordan and Matthias. As always, we're excited to be here to talk all things investing, real estate, and real estate investing. Today's is going to stick pretty strictly to real estate and not in the same vein that we normally do. We're bringing it back, Matthias. What would you do? It's been a minute.
Yeah.
It's been a minute since we've done a what would you do? What would Matthias do? Take your pick on which one you like better as a title. We can't decide.
We don't have any bracelets. What would Matthias do? WWMD. I don't know. That's a good
one of the reasons.
Those are bad initials.
That really could send confusing signals. But what we're going to talk about today, it's a what would you do? It's a when would you do? It's to refi or not on your own personal dwelling. So we're going to talk through the steps of that, the considerations. And Matthias is going to go ahead and give you a standard answer, and then we're going to launch into the real conversation. So, Matthias, refi or not?
Depends.
There we go.
I think we've covered everything. So it's good chatting. We'll see you next time. Nah, just kidding. But it really does. It depends. We'll talk about why.
Yeah, that's what we're going to get into now today is the variables of consideration for when to make that choice, if to make that choice. And let's go ahead and just set aside if you got a ridiculous rate in the period of like 2019 to 2021 or whenever that was exactly. I do not have that
as
rate.
I do. Yes.
Yeah. This isn't for you unless you're going to buy a new home.
The answer is no. The answer is no for me. Although there are options where it would make sense, but not. Yeah. So honestly, that brings us kind of to our first point, right? Is interest rates. Like
sneaky segue on my part.
Yeah, it was. So basically, I mean, you have to look at what you have, what your monthly payment would be, and what it is now and what it would be, right, with the refi. And obviously, it's going to go up. Even if the interest rate's the same, it's going to go up if you pull cash, right? There's more principal balance to the loan. So you'd be considering that. Some people just refinance for a lower rate. So if they bought it, let's say the worst time in early 2023 or something, just had to buy then, it might make sense already for them to refinance down, and that's just a math problem. Right, you're going. We'll talk a little bit about some of that math and some of the factors that go into math, but in general, interest rates. First of all, especially we're talking about for your primary residence. So I'm always going to advise people to get a fixed rate on their primary home. First of all, it's the hardest asset to take away in the event of a foreclosure is your own personal home. They can take rental houses, they can take a lot of things, but it's hard for a bank to take back and it takes a long time. So you got a lot of runway, a lot of safety cushion in there. So I would always do fixed rate. Hopefully you could survive and dig yourself out of some sort of hole that, life put you in, I guess. But I would always say fixed rate for your primary home. A lot of people are big for primary. A lot of people want to do 15-year notes. The reason you would do that is if it's like your forever home or close to it. You know what I mean? Like you're going to be in there a long time. Now, if you're going to be there 10, 15 years, absolutely. If you can afford it, do it as a 15-year note as much as you can, just because you're going to save in the long run. You're going to save potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars on just interest paid over the life of how long you have the loan. So,
right. Well, let's you kind of just threw all of it together there. So
I did.
Let's pull it back.
Just showing how the variables interact.
Right. Yeah. So let's just start with the most straightforward. One of the main catalysts for desiring a refinance is that you could get an interest rate on a loan that's lower than the one you have. And that difference would typically be, I think most people understand. I don't want to say significant. Significant seems a little bit too strong, but considerable.
Yeah. And like a percentage point. So like going from a 4.5% to a 3.5% is usually worth it, taking into account the other factors in terms of how long have you been in the house and how
a whole percentage point, start looking into it.
Yeah. But if you're going to be in the house for only another year or 2 years, you're going to pay so much in the refinance fees that you're not going to get the difference of that. So that's why you almost can't separate the variables, but interest rate would be a good reason to refi. But if you're going to be in the house for a long term, you just got to go with your gut at a certain point. You think, hey, interest rates have dipped. They may not go any lower than this. So I'm not going to wait longer. I'm just going to go ahead and pull the trigger. I know I'm going to be in this house for 10 years. Maybe you go ahead and pull the trigger then. And then, hopefully for your sake, hopefully interest rates don't trickle down more after you do that. But either way, over the life of the 10 years you're going to be at that house, you'll absolutely be saving money on, for half a percentage point or 0.75. If you went from like 4.5 to 3.75 or 3.6 or something like that, then you definitely come out on top on that. So really, a significant change in the interest rate and a long-term stay is a good reason to refinance. Or I would. Let me put it that way. I did, matter of fact. So we refinanced our house in like March of 2020. No, it was later than that. It was like sometime. It was in 2020 at some point. I remember because they had to have a mobile notary come to the house, and they were like spraying things down back when people still thought it was like to touch and all that stuff.
Right when that was,
it was like, oh my gosh,
down, and we were like washing the groceries. Yeah. Didn't know it wasn't. We can live on surfaces.
So I remember that, but I mean, we went down to the current interest rate below 3%. I think that we have now on our house. But interestingly enough, we'll get more into this later. But we didn't. We just went for the interest rate. We saw like this is ridiculous. I think we had like a 4.25 or something that sticks out of my head. Somewhere around there is what we had on the house, which is not bad. That's a fine
I wish I had
interest rate. But when someone's throwing 2.875 at you, you're going to go ahead and probably take that too. So it was significant enough, and we knew we were going to be in the house for a while. I was obviously in the military, and I had just moved jobs. We just had we had plenty of reasons that we knew we were going to be there for a while. So we went ahead and pulled the trigger on the refinance. We opted not to pull any capital. So really, we just rolled. It was a VA loan that we had initially used to buy the house, and then we just rolled whatever new fees back into the note. So we didn't change the principal balance. We just went down on the interest rate is what we did.
So that's
because go ahead.
That's a good little wrinkle to talk about because, of course, the math problem is essentially what is your payment now?
Mm-hmm.
What would your payment be with the fees? Either rolled in or amortized, if you will.
Yeah.
Like
they're amortized.
Pay them
so
up front. You got to add that to
the
like
VA. They're rolled in, so it'd be amortized. Yeah. So it's almost negligible. The fees over the 30-year mortgage are not. They don't change your payment much.
Right.
That may not always be the option for people. Sometimes you may have to pay the fees.
You have to pay up front. You might have to pay up front. Right. So either way, that's going to be added to the amount you pay. And what is that difference times however many months, essentially, you're going to be there? And I would think that I know these are kind of questions you don't like to answer because they're always variables, but considering a standard kind of, okay, this is lower than what I'm paying enough to the point of triggering a consideration, what's the minimum amount you need to be pretty certain you're going to stay in a house to make it worth it? Like 3 years?
It's a little, I tell people a little bit longer. I think it's closer to 4. If a refinance would save you, let's just do the math. Here we go. Yeah. So generally your refinance costs are going to be around $4,000 to $5,000, depending on, because you're going to have to pay for an appraisal potentially. There's things you'd have to pay for. Sometimes it can be done easier if you're not trying to pull cash. It is cheaper, right? Because they're not going to change the value. They've already got their original assessment. But all things being considered, let's say the cost is going to be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. You can save yourself $300, $400 a month or more. But it would need to be $400 a month on your mortgage payment with all, the escrows and everything added in. So make sure you're comparing apples to apples, not just principal and interest before they throw the taxes and insurance in there that they're going to do. Just do that math. Be like $400 a month.
That's $9,600 over 2 years. That's almost, if it was a $10,000.
Yeah, there you go. You're almost paying for it.
You're paying for it in 2 years. So
$400 is pretty significant. Yeah. Depending on the size of your, if you got a $10,000 mortgage, $400 isn't that big of a deal. But if you've got a $2,400 mortgage, that's a significant percentage. Yeah. So I'd say that's how I would do the math. I would say, what's the total cost? And that's the baseline for doing it. Now, I would also take into account, hey, how much control over when you moved. I was a military guy, so I knew, hey, they can't touch me because my assignment lasts for 3 years, so I'm good for 3. I'm just making this up. But if I've got an assignment for 3 years, I'm good. But if I'm coming up on the end of my assignment, I'm hoping for
Right.
another one, that would be a bad time to refinance because
Just roll
you
that,
could
for sure.
spend $10,000 to get your refinance, and then a year later you're selling the house in PCS and somewhere else. So I would take into account how much control you have. I mean, if you work for a company that's been moving you around every couple of years too, I mean, which these things happen, those that I would take that into account.
I would
as well.
rent. I would buy one time and then rent that one out and continue to rent myself. But anyways, that's different. But yeah, I think, well, so that's why I asked it in the way I did, which was reasonably consider, right? Because things happen, right? Even if you're not in the military, and you think
could lose a job or change jobs, and
and you're like, oh, I don't plan on moving, but then either you lose your job or you get an opportunity you just can't pass up, and it makes it worth even uprooting the kids or whatever the case may be. But reasonably can assume, for instance, Rachel being an educator in the county that she is, she's been there a long time. She's 10 years out from pension, blah, blah, blah. That would be, we're going to be in the area, not necessarily this house, but in the area. So that would be our choice to make. I guess that could be one of the, how committed do you want to be to the house, right? That's the other side of that coin,
sure.
I guess, is that if you do the refi and then
you're kind of committed, yeah.
You're kind of like, oh no, we're going to be here for a minute.
Yeah.
It's an interesting note, though, to point out that, and this makes sense, and people who have refied probably know this, or most people are looking into it, but it is interesting to note that if you simply are just going for the interest rate to lock in a lower one and not pulling money, it's going to be more straightforward. It's going to be cheaper. And if you're going with the same bank, obviously, then the wheels are
everything. It just, well, that's cheaper too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that kind of changes the consideration. If it's just, we can drop it down this much a month and roll in essentially, I guess, the origination cost, and maybe a couple other things.
And a lot of times it's waived. If, like I said, if it's the same lender, you're refinancing, they're doing something else. Because for them, it's like re-amortizing the loan too. They'll take whatever fees it took to do all their paperwork, but it might be significantly cheaper. You have some closing costs too, right? Because you have to
sure,
record it with the county and all that stuff. So
we're talking, that's way more like 2 to 4 though than like 4 to 10 on average. If you're just doing those things.
Agreed.
At which point,
a year
terms,
a year usually. We'll get to there.
Yeah, it could just be a kind of no-brainer, especially if I know you say always want to do fixed rate, but for whatever reason you're not in a fixed rate. I mean, that everything else works out okay to good.
Lock yourself into it.
Lock yourself in. Yeah,
that's true. And it bears mentioning too is that we live in an environment lately where everybody has equity in their house pretty much once they buy it. Although right now things are pretty flat, but if you bought anything, prior to the last 3 years, then you probably have some equity in your house. That is a consideration. You may not want to refinance if you're in a position where the market has been really flat or even declined a little bit in your area. You don't necessarily want the bank to be looking at your property that close in that situation.
Right, because even if considering the scenario,
because it might not be worth what you owe.
Yeah, if exactly. That's like, oh no, we don't want to take any money out. They're like, oh, that's not why we're coming out there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're going to do something. Yeah, so that would be a consideration to add to the matrix as well. But while we're on the topic of equity, people ask me quite a bit, about cashing out or pulling cash from their primary residence. But you do a cash out refinance, so add some debt. Like let's say you bought for $250 and it's now worth $350, and you're pulling $50,000. And while all these you've done the math and all this other stuff, and it makes sense, and you want to do it. I would consider all the other things that we've talked about, and I think it definitely goes into the decision matrix. Is what are you going to do with that money that you pull? Would I recommend that you do it to just pull and put into a savings account? Probably not, because you're not making whatever percentage. Not these days. You're not making the same percentage of return as you are paying in the mortgage, so you're losing money on that. Plus, there's inflation that you got to keep up with. But a lot of times people pull equity to remodel, renovate the house. Like if you're going to redo the kitchen, redo the bathrooms, you can talk to Jen and figure out where the best bang for your buck is in terms of updating, adding value to the house that your home and renovating stuff like that. But That's typically worth it, provided you're doing normal upgrade stuff, update stuff. Hey, the bathroom hasn't been done since we moved in 15 years ago. Maybe it makes sense to, you know, put some new tile or, what have you, whatever it is. But I would probably always consult with a local agent, real estate agent, somebody who's used to what brings value in the area, and just talk with them about, hey, I'm thinking about pulling money from the house in order to do renovations, and bounce your ideas off of them. I would recommend doing that. Because what you don't want to do is pull money, spend it all on the house, but it didn't change the value of the house at all. You could do that if it's that important to you to put a train tracks in your basement and run that thing like Mr. Rogers had. Probably not adding a whole lot of value to the house. Be cool, don't get me wrong, but make sure you're adding value if that's indeed your goal.
Well, again, I think that comes back to how long are you going to stay there? What's your goal for the house? If it's like, no, we don't plan on leaving, life plan says stay, then things that you want to do with the house, the decision matrix is in some ways it's the same. In some ways it's very different. It's how much joy is this going to bring you, or how dire is the situation that you're fixing, right? But if it's, we're going to do this because we think we can get enjoyment out of it, and then also eventually it will pay off for us down the road when we sell, maybe not dollar for dollar, but dollar for joy for dollar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. That's, your calculus you're doing. Yeah.
Then that is when you do need to consult. Because I know people, you probably know people. That's the mistake a lot of people make, is assuming one of two things or both, that what they like, the market likes.
That's a problem. Yeah.
And that there are just certain things that you can do to a house that always raise the value. And some of those renovations are definitely overvalued by the renovator.
Oh yeah. Well, the person, by the contractor, whoever's selling you the work they want to do.
But a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to put in this really awesome kitchen, for instance, and it's going to have all these things. And then when I go to sell, this is going to be a huge selling point.
Yeah, throw an extra $100,000 on the price of the house. Yeah. Not gonna do it.
And it's not gonna.
It might. Depends on how awesome it is, I guess. But another thing I would throw in there is that a lot of people go for personal taste and consider it an upgrade. Kind of what you said, but like, let's say it's got granite countertops. I want to get different colored granite countertops, which you are totally fine to do. But you didn't upgrade from Formica to granite. You just changed the color of the granite. I don't know that most appraisers, let's say, would consider that an upgrade. They just say it has granite countertops, and different colored this, that, or the other is just kind of the same thing. It's not necessarily going to add value. I suppose another thing that we should mention while we're on this topic is that, like, a lot of times there's maintenance, like it needs a new roof, the house, and you don't have $20,000-$30,000, whatever roofs cost in your area for your size house, don't have that laying around. So that would be another reason to even accept some negatives in a couple of these other variables. But hey, one, I'm not going to be able to sell this house without doing the roof. They're only getting more expensive. Or two, the insurance is going to drop me if I don't do it. So I have to replace this roof. That'd be a great reason to refinance and update the house or upgrade the house. But like maintenance that needs to be done that you don't have cash for, that's another good reason to pull some cash.
Yeah, I think some kind of serious imperative or impetus makes the calculations a bit more straightforward.
Yeah.
You need a roof. Exactly. And or because even if insurance wasn't going to drop you, it can become astronomical to the point that that's part of the calculation. Like, oh, I'm going to pay this much, and I may be paying the same or more in my mortgage, but that's less than I would be paying if I had to keep paying.
Right. I have been in that situation where I had to replace a perfectly good roof with a new roof because my insurance was adding. It was tripling. It was basically tripling each year, even though there's no leaks, nothing wrong with the roof, no visible anything. It was just old, according to the insurance company. So I replaced the roof for, I don't know, whatever we spent on the roof with the same calculus. If we didn't do a refinance to do it, but it's the same calculus. Like, hey, if we're going to save $8,000 a year on insurance, then that pays for that roof in 3 years or whatever. And so
yeah, exactly.
Here we are,
somewhere between 12 to 17 years at least of good roofing.
Yeah.
before this becomes an issue again. Yeah.
Before
absolutely.
the insurance company calls and says, "Hey, your new old roof is old."
Your new, back then new roof, now old roof. Exactly. So those kind of things do make it a little bit more straightforward. I guess it also would present you like, oh, how do I do this? Oh, I could refinance as a way to.
Yeah, that'd be a great way to.
Yeah.
I think I've talked with somebody about that very specific thing. I think she needed like a roof, and air conditioning was basically circling the drain, and she was like, I don't have any money. And I was like, well, but she did have equity in the house, and she was asking for advice on how to do a refinance. And I'm like, well, it sounds like you pretty much need to, otherwise, you're going to have way more problems.
Yeah. It's interesting that we've arrived at a point, because we started with should you, as in like, is this the right calculation?
There's some reasons where you may need to.
But there's situations where it's actually the solution. It's not.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, you're having another kid and there's not another room and you're not going to move. How do we add on?
Yeah.
Oh, so I was just trying to think about the ways in which people come to consider a refinance, right? Like, what are the situations where it's on their mind? And I think it's probably savvy people who know they had at the moment to buy at an interest rate they really didn't want, looking, just kind of keeping tabs. Then people who've just been in it for a while, been in a place for a while, and think, oh, well, there's probably some things to do here, whether that be just change the loan, like you said, to a 15-year, right? That would, right. So you may not need to do significant renovations to the house. You may not have much you want to do. You may not need to pull anything, but you just want to be on a different note.
Save some money long term on interest. Yeah, for sure.
So, and if you the interest rate difference is kind enough to you, and the principal is a certain level, you could almost move it to where you're not paying that much more on a completely different note, right? So, but then it's a solution to an issue. And then the other side of that is there are things I want to do. This is a financial move in a different way than the financial move of, oh, we can just save ourselves money.
Yeah. That kind of goes back to, hey, what are you going to do with the money? Are you starting a business, investing, doing any number of things? There's always the basic math of, hey, if your interest rate is 7%, don't pull more capital and earn 6% on an investment. You're paying the bank more money than you need to. That's a relatively simple. I mean, most investments are gonna, stock market is 7 to 9, over time, long term, whatever, and you could beat that in a bunch of different other types of investments. We do real estate, but you could be buying, like, starting a business, starting a side hustle, whatever. I caution people against. I mean, obviously, that goes into life, where you're at in your life and what's going on, and how, the rest of your financials. But I caution people against pulling cash from their primary residence to buy things that aren't specifically, it could be a thing that you're going to use for a business. That's different. I'm talking about just don't buy a boat with equity from your home or something like that. I think we already talked about it. One of the safest places is your primary residence that you live in terms of financial disaster hits you and your family or whatever. This just adds to that cushion. That whatever equity you have in your home is more safety factor that you have in there. I caution people. Well, I don't, and I would advise people not to use debt, which is what pulling cash from your house would be, to finance fun things or toys or entertainment, trips, what have you. I mean, I post about it on LinkedIn all the time. I think that should be paid for with investment income in the long term. Yes, you're building up your investment income, but don't add debt to go on a trip. If you have to add debt to go on a trip, then you can't afford to go on that trip. That's just, in my opinion, that's the way life works. Like, you can do that, but you'll never get anywhere. I suppose you'll be kind of a slave to whatever job and whatever debt payments you have on the fund you've already had. I would rather you wait a little bit longer, finance it with investment income. You've already deployed that money. You're not pulling from the deployed capital that you have working for you already. Use the money that the capital pays you to do the fun stuff. But if you're making an investment, doing something maybe school, some sort of training, learn a skill, whatever it is, that's an investment. I consider that an investment. Yes, I would say, generally that's probably a decent move. Because again, even though you're leveraging up in your home, it is safer than leveraging up on something else in terms of
Right.
the bank taking it from you. So that's kind of my philosophy when it comes to pulling cash.
Well, yeah, I can imagine two very different scenarios that you covered there. One is a scenario where I feel like this is there's no feeling. This is definitely something I've come across where people have been good with their money. They're not massive investors, but they've done well enough. They're not spendthrifts.
Making progress, growing their net worth.
They get to a certain point and they think, with where I'm at with my principal, where the interest rate difference would be, all these things, I can keep paying basically the same amount and then get X thing that would be life changing in one form or another. You said boat. That's kind of a big one where you're like, I could never really afford it otherwise, but I won't be paying any more. I mean, other than the upkeep of the boat, but we won't get into that.
I know that's like 3 houses right there.
Yeah, I mean, let's go simple. You've always wanted like a bass boat or something. I'm not talking yacht. I'm just talking. You've always
like
wanted
a John boat or whatever. Yeah, sure.
You want a little speedboat to go out in the lake or whatever. I can not spend any more money, right? Not really go into any more debt, and then have this thing. Of course, I think obviously your answer would be, well,
you are going into more debt, even though the payment's staying the same. You're adding to your overall.
Right. Let's try to get ahead to the point that instead of paying the mortgage, you're slotting it away to invest or something like that.
Now, granted, your interest rate is going to be less on your house. I mean, the home interest rate is going to be one of the lower interest rates, aside from like a brand new car where they offer you all sorts of deals. But like your interest rate is going to be relatively low on the home versus a boat.
Yeah. Well, especially, if you want to just go out and walk into, I don't know, whoever sells boats,
Bass Pro Shop,
and buy one there. Yeah, that loan's going to be not as good of terms. So, but that being said, I'm in this point in my life. This is something I really want to do. Get it. I get it. We get it. But the other side of that coin, though, is what you just said. The fact that it is such stable, safe debt that you could use to be deployable capital in an investment. That's interesting to me because it seems like that is a straight math problem, right? Where if you're like, oh, well, I'm paying this much to have the money, but the money is making this much money.
Yeah, whatever that split is. Let's say if you can make 16% on that money, but you're paying 5.5% to the bank to get that money, then yeah, you're up 9.5% on that money. That's a good investment, a good plan. I mean, that's why so many companies, big companies, finance research and development and or any sort of growth for their business with debt, is because they go, hey, the return on investment for buying all these new machines or whatever it is, like our productivity is going to go up and we're going to be able to make way more money on it than whatever interest rate we're paying until we pay it off. So that's my take. Just it hurts thinking about somebody pulling capital and then using it for something that would just make their life better. I know that's contrary to what a lot of people want to hear, but I have a little bit more patience, pull that money, invest it, then use the returns on that to make your life better. That's what I would always say. A little bit more delayed gratification. But in the long run, now you're paying for things not with debt, you're paying for it with returns.
Right. I mean, when you do the second of those scenarios, well, first of all, I should mention in my head, and I think a lot of people's head, it would be, oh, they pulled a little bit to buy the fun thing. They didn't like, I'll take it all. But it might actually be like an actual business decision or business-like decision, like you just said, if you wanted to invest it. I don't know. It's just an interesting kind of you trying to make your money and the financial system work more for you.
Sure.
Rather than others. But that's another calculation beyond the should I or not. But I think the sum up that part, or maybe probably the whole episode, is if you're going to do that last kind of choice, so I can do something better with this money than just letting either the bank have it or just sit as we've discussed before, potential, right?
Yeah.
As equity.
Mhm.
I guess you could do an ROE calculation.
Mm.
If you're going to do that kind of thing, whether it be a business, go back to school, invest in something that you otherwise wouldn't be within reach. That's, I just explained it. Actually, I was going to say you need to have a plan,
Mhm.
a specific plan.
Agreed.
And, yeah. So refi or not, obviously depends. But there's some pretty straightforward factors to consider. I think the two kind of unknowns are, or squishy, if you will. They're not necessarily unknowns. They're just not certain, which is how long are you going to stay? Because that kind of range of certainty could be completely, almost entirely certain to not at all. And then, is this the right time? Yeah, I guess interest rates could go lower. But, that's kind of like,
have they met the threshold of where it does make sense? That kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. If it makes sense and then it does go lower, you know what? That's kind of like, oh man, I bought a great stock at, it's 50% undervalued, and then its bottom, it got to 60% undervalued. Oh no. It's like, well, no.
And now it's back. Yeah. Or I sold a stock too soon and it went up another 10% after I sold it. It's like, well, it's still, you came out on top.
Exactly.
Maybe not as on topper as you could have been, but.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think that pretty much taps out this episode of What Would You Do? And we hope that you learned something, or maybe helped you think through some things going on with you. Either way, thanks for hanging out with us, and we hope that you got something out of it. We hope that you'll reach out if you have any questions, comments, or thoughts,
or we missed something.
Yeah, exactly. Or want to just talk to us about something. You can reach out to us all the ways that we are out there. So we appreciate you hanging out with us, and we hope that you'll come back and do the same next week on another edition of the Get Invested podcast.
See ya.